down a bit? Can you hear me? I'm sure you can. A bit like Dan, I can talk for hours about this. And it would seem I've got an hour to speak. Okay, so thank you very much for inviting me. Thank you so much to everyone here in Madrid who's organised this in this beautiful place. Isn't it wonderful? Hopefully we're going to have a nice few days. My name is Sue Morgan. I'm the Teenage Cancer Trust Nurse Consultant and I work in Leeds. And I'm happy to say that I've been working in Leeds for a very long time now, so I've been able to see its development. But what I'm going to do is do a quick history of time and talk to you about the history of TYA services in the UK. And as I said to Dan on the way, I am bound to have missed something out, something really important, like Teenage Cancer Trust or something. But hopefully I won't, so please bear with me. Why do we do this? This is one of our lads called Donovan, who said, because I don't want to be next to screaming babies or next to old fogies. Now in the UK, old fogey is an old person. And if you ask a teenager what an old person is, they'll probably say 55. And I'd be very upset by that. But it's because they needed and they wanted their own space, and that's why we do it. And this is what it's like for a teenager with cancer. They're sort of on this big road, and they have their treatment, and some have their treatment and they move on, and they do very well in life and barely look back. And other young people have more difficulties and can fall off at anywhere, at any time, with any sort of problem. So we've got to understand their needs, and I'm sure that we'll go into this a bit later, but just to sort of start my talk, we need to understand what the essence of adolescence is, if we can remember back that far. They need their autonomy, but they also need protection. They've got limits and goalposts, and they need those limits and goalposts. In fact, when we started our unit in Leeds, we asked them, okay, what do you want from a service? How do you want your unit to run? And they were far harder on themselves than we actually would have been. So if you ask them, they want those guidelines and they want those goalposts. They need to have control of that situation that they're in. They need to build their own identity despite having cancer. They need to be me. In the middle of all this, they need to be me. Not me, them. I want to be me. They're at the cusp of initiating their intimate relationships. They're about to embark on having intimate relationships and establishing their own sexual identity. They need to achieve their aspirations for the future. The future doesn't finish. It might change their future, but it doesn't finish because they have cancer, and we have to help them through that journey. They need to keep their life as normal as possible. That normal has probably changed now that they've got a cancer diagnosis, but they need to keep that normality in their lives. They need to keep their links with their family members and their peers. Peer group support is pivotal to what we do. And they want to get better, and we have to remember they are young people first who just happen to have cancer. Okay, so old Socrates here. It took me a while to work out his date of his birth, and then I realized it was BC. I thought they got it wrong in the books. Anyway, so Socrates said, our youth now love luxury. They have bad manners. They have contempt for authority. They show disrespect for their elders and love chatter in place of exercise. They no longer rise when elders enter the room. They contradict their parents. They chatter before company. They gobble up their food and they tyrannize their teachers. So not much has changed. There's a bit of a slide here. There's mum and dad asking this young man, how was your date? Fine. What did you do? Nothing. And that's what teenagers are like, and that's what they're like to work with a lot of the time. How are you? Fine. Anything to tell? No. And then the mother or father will tell you what they've got to tell you. So this is what it's like working with some young people. In 1959 in the UK, there was the Platt report it was the first to mention that the requirements of adolescents differed from those of adults and children, and ideally adolescents need their own accommodation. That was in 1959, so what kept us? And it was that report that, that started the idea that wouldn't it be a good idea if mums and dads were allowed to stay when children were in hospital? And then I found this picture of two little people in an iron lung with their mums just looking through the window at visiting time. And that's what it used to be like. When I was 11, I had a very sick young brother, and I remember my mum and dad having to go in at visiting time only, and that was in 1968. So quite a lot has changed since then. In the 1970s, a teenager's bedroom was a bit like this, with all sorts of equipment and everything around it. Is yours like that now? Yeah, a bit like that, yeah, a bit more modern. All of that fits into one little stick now, though, doesn't it? Yeah. So that's what a teenager's bedroom would look like in the 1970s. Yet they were expected to go into a hospital with just a bed and nothing else. In the 1990s in the UK, the Teenage Cancer Trust came along. It used to be a sportsman's club of some sort. It came from boxing, I can't quite remember. But anyway, it was a sportsman's club. And then some parents got together and thought about young people who were being treated for cancer in hospitals. And in the 1990s, their strapline was to empower young people every step of the way through their cancer journey was our core ambition. And the amazing achievement is that the ethos of today's Teenage Cancer Trust is fundamentally the same. And that's from Myrna Whiteson, who was one of the founders and is now still active in Teenage Cancer Trust. So the Teenage Cancer Trust is a charity now devoted to improving the lives of teenagers and young adults with cancer. They have family support networks. They provide education for young people in schools. They provide specialist services alongside the National Health Service. So, for instance, they fund myself and part of Dan's funding, wage. And they also fund youth support workers to work alongside the National Health Service, who do a wonderful job. They fund research projects, they fund staff, they fund bespoke TYA education. They do a massive job of influencing policy with MPs, within Parliament, and they hold the 2-yearly international conference, which is in July of this year if you wish to go. They do a fantastic job, and they've been pivotal, really, in steering the way teenage and young adult care happens in the UK. In the 1990s, they opened their first unit in the Middlesex Hospital. That was in 1990, sorry, not the 1990s. And this is one of the remaining photographs of that unit. In 1995, we had the Kalman-Hind report. So if you remember from the Platt report to now, not a lot's happened really. So in 1995, saying that purchasers should look for the opportunity for developing treatment for adolescents with cancer, as they present special medical and psychosocial problems and require specialised care. So this was just a big document with one paragraph about adolescence. But the rest of the UK was starting to wake up and take action, led largely by the Teenage Cancer Trust, but by pockets of individuals everywhere in the UK who were thinking, now this isn't right. So these small pockets started developing and started to start services in their own hospitals in some small way. So in 1998, Teenage Cancer Trust built units in Leeds and in Manchester. Networks started to form, very small networks. When I started my job in 1998, it makes me sound old, I was only 10. I started to form a network, and I looked around, and there were 2 other hospitals that I could talk to and who wanted to start working with me. And then from that small network, a smaller network for us grew. And medics were doing things in different places. So we started to share ideas and things started to move forward. And then we all realised how hard this was going to be. It was really, really hard. You had these massive battles to fight. I'm the little person there. And I used to work with the lovely Ian Lewis, and I was like his little Exocet missile. And he used to say, right, go off and talk to them, sir. So I'd go off and talk to them, and I'd go back crying. You know what they said to me, Ian? They said it's a load of rubbish. So get a grip and go back out and talk to them again. So it was about going out and talking to people and knowing that they weren't shouting at you, or they weren't saying that you were rubbish, but that your idea was rubbish. And why on earth would you want to have teenagers in their own space? And why on earth should I let this young person who's on an adult ward go to a teenage ward? Because actually, having a young person on an adult ward makes our life worthwhile, and it's really nice having a young person on an adult ward. And we had lots of these battles, and why should you treat them, and why should we treat them? And battles that everybody are facing, or have faced, or will have faced. But hopefully, those of us who've gone ahead will have sorted out a lot of those battles, but there certainly were quite a lot of them. Anybody know this bridge? Valerie, do you know this bridge? It's in France somewhere. Anyway, I wouldn't want to go up it. But anyway, it felt like there was a big bridge that you had to go up, and you didn't know what was going to be at the top or what was going to be at the other end. But I think that now all of us working together have been able to do that. So access to health professionals was one of the problems. Who should that young person go to? So should it go to the person who's got the TYA expertise, or should it go to the person who's got the TYA expertise? Actually, it's taken us about 15 years to cajole people, to talk to people and say, actually, they need the disease expertise and they need the TYA expertise. So developing services around these pivotal points has been the way forward, and one of the big battles that we've won together. And one of the challenges also is about learning new skills. I don't know how that tiger got up there, that lion got up there, I have no idea. But anyway, it's about learning new skills, because pediatricians and adult oncologists, or pediatric nurses and adult nurses, or psychologists, or whoever we are, it's about learning those new skills, about developing services for young people in the middle, and about working with these young people. Is a completely different model of care to both teenagers and adult care. So we've all learnt that together. So what skills do you need? You need to work as part of a team. You need expertise in the disease process and the treatment and the biology, as we were hearing earlier. We need to understand teenagers and young adults and how they work, and the way they think, and the way they're going to comply with treatment or not. We need communication skills, plus. We need to be non-judgmental. I've got one young man who's got 3 phones, and he's got gold teeth. It's a razzer. Why have you got 3 phones? One for my girls, one for my parents, and one for my drugs. I went, oh, okay. That's fine, razzer. Non-judgmental. Not easily shocked. There you go. You need to have a sense of humour. When we asked young people what their number one quality for being a nurse was, for a paper that we wrote, their number one quality was having a sense of humour. It didn't matter if you didn't know what you were doing, as long as you had a sense of humour, and that was so important to them. You need to have the patience of a saint. You need to have a very thick skin, because they tell you how it is. If you've got a top, you're wearing a top that looks dreadful, they'll tell you. You need to have innovation and creativity, along with an ability to think out of the box. But the challenges of setting up services are getting everyone on board. Not everyone understands the need for doing it. Not all your young people will want to come to your service or be treated by teenage young adult experts. Getting the message across without being too evangelical. I think the biggest one is that we found in developing service was working with professionals from every single speciality, networking with them, working with them. Ensuring that education is provided, which I'll talk about a bit in a minute. Keeping all your plates spinning, you know, like people spin plates, keeping all those spinning. And working with lots of teams, lots of egos, lots of opinions, eccentricities, opposition, professional jealousies, and ownership of the patient. How many times have we heard, "That's my patient"? And change. People don't like change. So changing the way in which you work is one of the hardest things to do. And sometimes it feels a bit like that. So in 2004 in the UK, the professional group TIAC, Teenage and Young Adults with Cancer, was formed, a national group for professionals. And I know that I'm sure that Valerie will talk in a moment about the French group, and I know there's a Spanish group now, which is fantastic. So this is all growing now, and ours started in 2004. And it was as a network for all professionals working with young people to get together to share expertise and to understand better what we were doing. We improved the communication between the stakeholders. We were advocating for teenagers and young adults and professionals, and we were promoting research, education, and information. It's for all professionals. They have access, when you join, it's only about £20 a year, which is nothing. You get access to national conferences, seminars and workshops, meeting, websites, a weekly e-bulletin and newsletters. And there are many different professions who are members of this. And it's a growing body of people. And at the moment there are only 358, so we're trying to get more. But it's a very important network of people for us to join, and we're working there. In 2005, we had a national document. I won't urge you all to read it, but it was the Improving Outcomes Guidance for Children and Young People with Cancer. And this came out in 2005. And we've just been recently implementing the measures in the UK. So this was about having a principal treatment centre, which was a big hub, and then the spokes went out to district general hospitals where young people were treated. So most young people under the age of 19, it's very complicated, I won't bore you with it, but anyway, principal treatment centre in the middle of it all. Most young people went to this. This was where the real expertise of teenage and young adult cancer was. But 19 to 25-year-old patients could choose where they wanted to be treated. So they could be treated in this big centre, or say if they had breast cancer, they could be treated in a centre that was about 60 miles away from the principal treatment centre. So they could be treated there if they so wished, but have access to the work that we did in the principal treatment centre. A bit of a hub and spoke thing. And the place of care meant that it was in the best, it was best for the person, the young patient, so they could choose where they wanted to be, where possible. But the most complex treatment would be done in the principal treatment centre. So for young people with Ewing's, germ cell tumours, bone tumours, brain tumours, would come to the principal treatment centre. As I said, it's complicated. But there are now in England, so this guidance was for England. In England, there are 13 principal treatment centres. And for every principal treatment centre, there are about 7 or 8 hospitals that that principal treatment centre would then work with. That sort of describes it, really. Hub and spoke. We were also asked to develop multidisciplinary teams. So in the principal treatment centre, we would have a teenage and young adult multidisciplinary team where the expertise, the disease expertise, and the teenage and young adult expertise would meet together, discuss every young person in the principal treatment centre and in all those other centres that were out there, to ensure that the young person was getting the correct treatment at the correct time, that they have a key worker, that their fertility options have been discussed with them, that they've had a choice, and importantly, that they've been entered onto a clinical trial or been offered a clinical trial where appropriate. So hopefully this will increase the standard of care delivery that we give to each young person. So this is us and our MDT. There's Dan in the front, there's me in the back, and there's just X-ray up on the wall. And there were challenges for that, but I think we've overcome a lot of those now. Because there are so many MDTs, starting another one was hard for people, but we've managed to negotiate around all of that. Willingness, protocols, what's the benefit, and commissioning, and we've managed to get around that. And in Leeds in particular, we have developed a very good MDT under Dan's leadership that delivers excellent care to young people, and it means that we know every young person within a 70-mile radius, young person who has cancer, are now known to us and can receive the care, teenage and young adult specific. So now we know that referral pathways are clearer, there's an increase in access and accrual to clinical trials, we have open, honest debate, that means we argue a bit. There's a willingness from many to be part of this. We have lots of discussions, a mutual attendance, so we will go to the breast cancer MDT, for example, and they'll come to our TYA MDT, and there's a lot of superb team working that goes on. So that has been hard work. It's been several years in the making, but eventually that's all come together. And there was an email after we'd had a little bit of a spat with haematologists that I quite like from Ian Lewis, and he's not here, so I'll put the email up, where we'd had a bit of a heated debate. And he said, I think of this as groundbreaking and not awkward. It's about us trying to continue the move toward one TYA team rather than a series of components pushing against each other. So this is how we have seen our honest, open debate. And he's right, every one that we've had, we've managed to go forward that little bit more. And the remit of that, working with everything else, with TIAC, Teenage Cancer Trust, they all sort of work in together, was to ensure that young adults considered and have opportunities to enter research protocols that were generated by this clinical studies group. And so that they were provided with the optimum health care for each patient in that group, and to provide that evidence base for the nice outcomes. And to ensure that the research agenda is set with young people, and they have a core group of young people who help to decide the way that this group is going. Priorities have been benchmarking trial availability. They've done a lot of work on trial availability that Dan talked about earlier. Evaluating the relevance and activity in other groups. So if other groups, for example, the melanoma group, we need to talk to them about TYA issues. Cancer registration for teenage and young adults. They've been addressing delay in diagnosis. And very importantly, they've just been doing a very large study, which I'll talk about very soon, called Bright Light. So the priorities: survivorship and late effect issues, host and tumour-specific differences in TYA cancer, grant and trial protocol reviews, and setting the research agenda. So all of this is going alongside everything else that's happening. So from one small little thing, all these big things are growing, but they all work together. This is Dan's slide that you saw earlier, I nicked. So this is about TYA now being in the medical curricula, which is very, very important. 2010, talking about trials, fertility, late effects, development, independence, risk-taking, vocational transition. And next we're sorting out nursing. And I'm working with Sam Smith, and we had a meeting the other day about teenage and young adult nursing competences, which will be published at the end of the year and will be available through the Royal College of Nursing. Training for teenage and young adults, that's coming together in the UK as well. So we've got the Coventry University course, which is online. They also have 2 times 2 day course for teenage and young adult, which is also multi-professional. We have advanced communication courses. We have many local study days, the TCT International Conference and TIAC Conference Day. So there's a lot of work being done, being generated. So Bright Light, named by the young people, is asking the question, do specialist services for teenagers and young adults with cancer add value? This was started in 2012. The plan was to get over a year 2,012 young people to be part of this study. It's for young people aged 13 to 24 years of age. It's now, because recruitment has been very, very slow for lots of reasons. Imagine getting this open in several hundred hospitals. I think has been maybe 100 hospitals, has been a very big task. So they're doing the evaluation of cancer services through survey and health economic records. And young people will be interviewed 4 times over 3 years, up to 36 months after diagnosis. Many young people have wanted to be part of this. Some young people have not wanted to be part of this. And for that reason, accrual has been quite difficult. But what they will do is demonstrate the value of specialist services, because it's all very well starting up services. But when somebody says to you, well, what's the proof? Where's the proof? We have no proof. We think it's the right thing to do. We know it's the right thing to do, but we don't actually have any hard evidence. So this will give us the proof. They'll find out what the most important parts of specialist care and how they may be improved, help to improve the specialist training for TYA staff, understand the cost to the patients in the NHS, because we know it's a very, very expensive speciality. We know that, and we've got to prove that it's cost-worthy. And inform the planning of future services. So that's going to be some very important information that's going to come out of that, which will hopefully give us the impetus to go forward. And this is just the recruitment. I managed to get the one where we've fallen, Leeds teaching, we've fallen behind a bit, but we're back. We're going to win. The UK, as everywhere else, does a lot of patient involvement. They're involved in many aspects of the research work we do, of the service development. We're always asking young people, is this the right thing to do, and how's the best way to do it? There's a fantastic website called Jimmy Teens. I urge you to go on it and have a look. It's a website that's made by young people for young people. They make their own films on a flip cam. They somehow plug it into a computer, it gets to Jimmy Teens headquarters, and they make their own videos. There are hundreds of videos on there of young people telling their story. We also have a yearly conference called Find Your Sense of Tumour, that's funded by Teenage Cancer Trust, where we have 350 young people for a whole weekend during a holiday camp. Dear God. And it's fantastic. It's a really motivational thing to go to, and young people absolutely love it. And that's where they can learn and when they can network, and they realise, many of them, they're not on their own. So this is a little brief history of the teenage unit in Leeds. 1998, we had a 6-bedded unit. Gradually, it's been a bit like a snowball. We've gone forward and there was me, I was the one member of staff, and it's snowballed, and we've got more and more staff, and we've got bigger. We've got $1.5 million in 1999 to support more teenage and young adult work within adult oncology. Teenage Cancer Trust then supported our first consultant, which is now Dan. We then got a 4-bedded unit in adult oncology. In 2008, we got a 9-bedded unit within adult oncology and a 10-bedded unit within pediatric oncology. So we now have 19 teenage and young adult beds for young people aged 13 to 24 years of age with cancer, over 2 sites. All this has been possible in the UK because of the support of so many charities. The National Health Service would not be able to fund this on its own. They fund all the basic, superb stuff. But the charities here have funded everything else for us. And it's been negotiating and navigating those charities that has been one of the hardest things to do in order to get the services that we have. So we're indebted to those people. So it's very much a collaboration and lots of teamwork. This is our model of care. So on the left, you've got pediatric oncology. On the right, you've got all the adult oncology and hematology. And in the middle, everything merges to create a teenage and young adult cancer service that delivers care to each young person who comes to us. But we know we're not perfect. Well, not quite perfect. And we know at an audit a few years ago, we realised that we were missing these young people on the right-hand side. And the biggest ones that we were missing were those young people with skin cancer. So that young person who would come in and have a mole removed, we'd find out it's melanoma, and they will go to the melanoma clinic and they'll go off and they won't be followed up and we don't know anything about them. So we're making moves to change that now. And so we're working with the melanoma team, so we are now notified of every single young person, and we will go and meet that young person because they still have a diagnosis of cancer. It might be a touch of cancer, as we might call it, but it's still a diagnosis of cancer, and it's important to that young person, and it's also important that we know that. So there's still a lot of work that we have to do. We provide age-appropriate care now in these beautiful units. I'll show you some pictures, and these are what the Teenage Cancer Trust will fund for us. These are pictures of our unit on a very, very tidy day with no people around. But these are the units that Teenage Cancer Trust fund for us. But as I say, everywhere I go and everything that I do, you can have the most beautiful unit in the world. But it's what you do in it and with it that actually matters, and the people like you who matter, who deliver that care. And when we first started, we had a tiny 4-bedder, and it was really grotty, it was really, it wasn't very nice, but the young people loved it, and it became their home. And that was a perfect place for young people, and it didn't have anything fancy. So this is lovely, but it's what you do in it that matters more than anything. Oh, another one. That's looking very tidy as well. So we started small, 1 unit, 2 sites. When we started in 1998, we had 22 referrals a year, and we've now gone up to 120 a year, and we get nearly every young person who comes through our region. Oh, another picture. Didn't know that was there. Oh, another one. And we also have Wi-Fi. I loved that. So that was one of the most important things, was for each young person, and you're all nodding down there, for each young person to have access to the outside world. So they need internet access, they need Facebook, they need their mobile phones, they need all of that. And I was reminiscing the other day about going to a meeting about 12 years ago when we were going to have a computer put in on the ward. A computer, wow. And now we've got all this Wi-Fi stuff everywhere, so it's fantastic. So young people being kept in touch with the outside world is pivotal. So what are the benefits? So it's development of a new speciality. We're fairly certain that it will show an increase in years to come in survival, but we haven't had enough time at the moment to prove that. We're developing a deeper understanding of the disease and management of young people. We've got better notification and registration, improved trial accrual, that knowledge that helps us to bridge that gap now. Hopefully, we're developing a model of care that others aspire to, and I know by everybody being here that you're all doing that, which is just awesome. We can enable young people to be treated where is best for them and then continue to support them there. And the Bright Light study is going to help us enormously. There are now 27 Teenage Cancer Trust units in the UK. There's now education, research studies are on the increase, cancer registration, as I said, more referrals to the Principal Treatment Centre, more young people are being offered choice. But there are still gaps, and there's still lots to do, which is why we are all here today. So we've done a lot over the last 20 or so years. We've done lots, as lots of other people have done. But now we can do so much more. Because we're in Europe. I think that's Europe. I'm not very good at geography and maths and things like that. But I think that's Europe. It said Europe when I Googled it. Not very good. So we can do so much more together, which is fantastic that we're all here. And we won't have so much fighting anymore because we're all here and people have forged the way ahead and have highlighted what teenage and young adult services do. So it's really important now that we build on all the work that people have done, not just in the UK, but everywhere else. Learn from that and go forward. It's very important that you don't give up. That little frog wasn't going to give up. And remember, they're young people first who happen to have cancer. And there are challenges to us as professionals, and Valerie and I were talking very briefly back there just now. And we were talking about developing young adult, teenage and young adult services and units and putting young people together. And while they're together, it's fantastic because they get so much from each other. But we also enable them to face a young person who's dying. So what we do is we encourage them to make friends and to meet peers. But that young person might die, or their friend of them might die. And we have to be really careful when we're working with these young people to build that into everything that we do. But the challenge to us as professionals as well, that they are wonderful, they're entertaining, they're individual, and they're our future. They're inspirational, challenging, heartwarming, and funny. Absolutely frustrating. And sometimes for us, they can be utterly heartbreaking. So we have to look after ourselves. And this is a picture of a young man called Jamie. And I took this when we went on a bit of a sailing trip with Ellen MacArthur. And I showed him that picture. And I said, can I put it on the end of my talk next week, Jamie? And he said, yeah, you can put it on the end of every talk if you like, Sue. So from Jamie and me, thank you. Any questions? Like Dan, I can talk for hours. Like Dan, I'm here till Friday night. Like Dan, a bit later, I'll have a lot of wine and I might be very chatty then. Any questions? Oh, I'm behind you.
Hello, thank you very much. Thank you very much for your nice presentation. And I'd like to ask you if you have a problem with long-term survival, this transition of care to adulthood.
Yes.
Especially we are following people up to 25 years, and that is the age that we have to shift them to the adult part of the oncology. And sometimes this is the problem because there is a lot of the adult patients, and if somebody is 10 years after finishing a good treatment, then there is a problem, and we lost, in the history we lost so many young people from the long-term follow-up, so we don't know how they are currently. So can you tell us something about this problem?
So these young people, do you transition through treatment? So they start
treatment, no.
No, so long-term follow-up. Okay, Dan might be best to answer this, but in the UK, we have long-term... Oh, microphone! I'm normally loud enough as it is. In the UK, we have long-term follow-up clinics, and Dan actually helps to run one. So a young person after 5 years, say we looked after a 24-year-old who started treatment for bone cancer. We would see that young person through treatment, and we would continue to see them 5 years after treatment in normal clinic. They would then go to a long-term follow-up clinic, which is run by Dan in the same place as it was before. So this young person would then go to the long-term follow-up clinic, and the key worker would transition them through, introduce them to their new key worker, who would then follow them through again. So it's about having a key worker at the other end. And I know I'm doing quite a lot of transition work in the General Hospital in Leeds, and I know that there are patients who've had a liver transplant who take their anti-rejection medication whilst they're within the paediatric service. They get transferred into adult services, and they don't take their medication, and then they die. And that happens, and that's outrageous. So we've got to sort that out. But I think it's about having a key worker one side and transferring them to another key worker with some time in between for them getting used to all of that. Do you want to say something, Dan?
There are lots of different models for this. I think the key is that we have found are about this service for survivors and this transition being a process. It isn't a day when you stop this and start this. It's a process that may take some years and may require to be designed around the young person and what they need. You need to build trust and understanding, and you need to educate the young person as you go along. And so increasingly, as a young person comes to the end of their treatment, whether they're a child or a younger adolescent or an older adolescent or a young adult, they're given information, a summary of what's just happened to them. Because often they feel as if they've been in a boxing match and they haven't really been able to listen to everything. Give them information about what's just happened and a plan. What will happen next and after that, and we give them time to get used to this. We've been able to do this by working together. The big challenge in young adult oncology, or a big challenge in young adult oncology, is that we do not understand the late effects of cancer treatment for young adults nearly as well as we do for younger children. And so giving clear enough advice is much harder.
Any more questions? I'm sure there are a lot of questions. You can tell them in Spanish if you want, from the nurses. I have a question. I think a lot of people are thinking, how did it start? I mean, how were the first steps? How can you convince the adult oncologist and the pediatric oncologist to have these units or to treat these patients?
I think that it first started through leadership. It first started by people writing down what they felt was important when they were leaders. The Platt report, the Kalman-Hein report, brave people who were bringing about other changes, were interested to include in those changes in the health service, were interested to include this issue, to recognize it. And then it then moved because there were people who were very good with the public and with politics and the public opinion in the Teenage Cancer Trust initially, who put this on the national stage. We were very lucky. The people who set up the Teenage Cancer Trust had big links to people in the music industry, and were able to get a publicity moving with young people by that linkage into the music industry in London. Then I personally think, as Sue has said in her talk, that the arguments, the disagreements, the difficult things that happen that make everybody feel, oh, this is very hard, we don't think this has been right, we think this could have happened better. Everybody moves back a little and is worried, but actually the arguments have been so important. To have those discussions well voiced, not to be nervous of those, not to be frightened of them, but to have them, get them done, get them said. And people remember those and make changes to how they think for years after a discussion.
And I think the other thing, thank you, that's important and that people will listen to is the voice of young people. We used to have a steering group that we got one of the big bosses who people were a bit frightened of to chair for us. We weren't frightened of him. And we took young people and parents with us. And they behaved so well. Not the patients, I mean, they behaved well, but, you know, all the staff, they behaved impeccably when there was a young person there. And I think that it's very hard to ignore what patients say. So I think it's really important that you have the voice of young people there. It's another way of doing it. Patient pressure. Patient pressure involvement.
Yeah.
It's much better. Yeah. Coined a new phrase.
I think this is an important principle, that if you have professionals, doctors, nurses, other professionals who don't agree with each other, that conversation is much more constructive if there is a patient or a patient parent in the conversation. They behave in a different way, and they want to help. Yes, they behave in a different way and they want to help. If there's a young person or a parent involved. And our ability to, we had at PSYOP Europe in London 2 years, was it ago? Can't remember, a year and a half ago. We had a very interesting conversation with Brad Zibrak from the US. And he said, when you're trying to put a message across, you have to think what the message is, and then think who is the very best person or group of people to put that message to the audience. So if doctors and to some extent nurses go to politicians to give a message, or to managers of hospitals to give a message, they can achieve some things. But if a group of patients and the public go to talk to politicians and hospital managers, they achieve a different thing. So which do you want to achieve? At each point you want to try and change something. Which do you want to influence? Who is the best? Who are the best people to help you to do this? Not easy, but it isn't something we have done very deliberately. It's happened by chance with us, and we can look back and see.
And it's hard when you don't have the proof as well.
Yes.
We're working on it.
We need the research.
You hear me?
Ooh,
Yes.
yeah.
Oh, sorry. Okay, I just wanted to ask Sue about how nurses are trained in the UK. If you have courses, or how are you going to develop the skills that we have seen that already doctors have?
It's interesting, isn't it? Because we've all learnt on the job. A lot of us so-called experts, we've learnt on the job. And but it's about imparting the knowledge that you've actually learned. And there, in Coventry, I mentioned in one of the slides, the Coventry University have an online international course where you can do up to master's degree level online, teenage and young adult cancer course specifically. There's also TYA competencies, nursing competencies, and a framework for nurses is being developed through the Royal College of Nursing. Sam Smith's leading that, so I'm working with her to do that. So that will be published very soon as well. So it's all coming out.
Is the Sunday before the TCT nursing thing open,
Yeah.
or is it closed?
I think it's closed.
We are having a further process around this. In your bags, there is
Yeah.
information
It
about
might be
the
open.
Teenage Cancer Trust International Conference in London in July. You see
That's how you get
now
doctors to
see
do
how
things.
It works.
Yeah, that's how it works.
Yeah. In your bags, there is some information about one other particular conference. This is in London in July. And on the Sunday before the Teenage Cancer Trust International Conference, there is a whole day on nursing competencies and skills and how we gain agreement about how to do this. And then the evening is about medical competencies and skills before we go to the main conference on the Monday and the Tuesday. And if people would like to take part in that, I don't know exact details, but again, speak to Sue or I, or Gurpreet or Simon, who put your hands up, Gurpreet, Simon, there they are, who work with us also, yeah? And then we can take your details and see if people can join us. I think they will probably be very welcome. I haven't agreed it yet fully, but I'm sure we can find a way.
And the other thing is that we do a lot of, people come and work with us for a while. Yeah. So if anybody here, not all at once, wanted to come over to the UK to work on a unit with us, or just to see what we do, then people are very, very welcome to do that. You know, we're here to share what we've learned. So if anybody wants to come, then just let Simon know. Yeah, no, you're very welcome. And that's a lot of how we've learned how to do things, all of us just sharing things in that way. But yes, specific nursing things are being developed and will be out soon. And it'll probably go out through ENCCA, through this network.
Thank you for your talk. And I would like to ask you, what about the costs? I mean, is all on the national health system, or do you have any other funds? Or because it seems amazing what you have built.
National Health Service provide fantastic hospitals, fantastic medical care, fantastic drugs and everything. All the nice bits, the slide I showed with all the charities, all the nice bits are funded by charities. So Teenage Cancer Trust will pay for the ward to look beautiful and to make me look beautiful, because they pay for me, for a bit of Dan as well. And we'll have another charity that will pay for social workers. Click Sargent will have another charity who will pay for a learning mentor for us. So they will pay for all of that. But the other thing is, the other thing is that the wards to run, because they're small, are very expensive to run. And we get into a bit of trouble with all of this, really, because we've got one unit on 2 sites. So in the children's hospital, we've got an 8 to 10 bedded teenage cancer unit there for the 13 to 18-year-olds. That unit is embedded within a paediatric oncology ward. Okay, so there's a paediatric oncology ward that's about that big, and then there's a TYA unit that's about that big in the middle of it. So all the staff are all part of that, and they all work together, and they all rotate round together, and the patients will, if the teenage unit's empty or quiet, then some of the children will go in there, and the teenager will go into it, so it overspills. So it sort of flexes. And that works well, and that's economical, and that runs as a normal children's cancer unit. But the unit that we've got in adult oncology is on its own. It's a 9-bedded unit on its own, and that 9-bedded unit will take the same amount of staff to run it as a 20-bedded unit would take, because you've got to have a minimum amount of nurses, trained nurses on that ward. So that little unit is seen as very expensive, and we have to justify nearly all the time what we're doing and why we're doing it. And I think if we had our time again, personally, we would put that unit within a bigger adult unit and run it the same way. Still have just for young people there, but run it so that it's more economical. One member of staff goes off sick on that 9-bedded unit and you're stuffed. You've got to find yourself another member of staff. But if you're within a bigger unit, then you can get more people to work with you. So they are very expensive to run the small ones, but if you put them with something bigger, then they work better, would be my view. But it's a very expensive service.
We have very clear rules, really, about if you add cost to a service in the UK, in the National Health Service, if you add cost, you have to demonstrate what you're buying, and what you're buying are quality-adjusted life years. So you are either buying longer lives or better quality. Yeah? And so within Bright Light, we are measuring the quality of life, survival, and all of these costs are all being measured very accurately. And we will know in what will turn out to be about 1,000 patients how the costs and the quality and the length of and the survival match and balance. This is very important. If this is successful, then we have then made our case that this is more money, but more money to buy a good thing. Yeah?
And we also get a lot of comments about, you've got all this money and you're doing all this nice stuff, and why should we be doing all this nice stuff when we're not doing all that nice stuff? But people hopefully are looking at what we do and seeing how good it is, that they will try and up their game to come to work to the standard that we work with teenagers and young adults. But it is quite difficult because we do get a lot of charitable funding. And I find that quite difficult sometimes. Well, I don't. Well, I do. It's fine. But, you know, when you're working with other units that don't have the influx of money that we get to do this, can be a bit embarrassing sometimes. But I get over it.
Okay, so thank you very much. We have coffee break now. Please be here at 4 p.m.